Throughout his presidential campaign, Donald Trump continuously promised to prioritize American workers, in part by reducing the trade deficit with China. However, despite enacting massive tariffs, the U.S. has seen its trade deficit with China remain comfortably above $300 billion a year. Let's talk about why. So, to understand how the trade deficit works, we first have to understand how the international currency exchange market works. We can do this with a simple example. Let's say that you are an American consumer, and you want to buy a hat from China. You will pay for that hat using your American dollars. But what happens behind the scenes is that your American dollars are then exchanged for Chinese renminbi, which is paid to the hat seller. Thus, demand for Chinese goods creates demand for Chinese renminbi. And just like in a market for a normal good, an increase in demand for a currency increases the value of that currency. So how does this relate to the deficit? The currency exchange market and the trade deficit are related through a concept known as the Lerner symmetry theorem, which states that a tax on imports will have the same effect as would have a tax on exports, which is obviously an undesirable result. When Trump imposes tariffs on Chinese goods, he raises the cost of those goods for American consumers. As such, American demand for Chinese goods decreases. And remembering the example from before, the decrease in demand for Chinese goods decreases the demand for the Chinese renminbi, thereby reducing its value relative to the dollar. The effect of all this is that now, as a result of the tariffs, the same basket of American goods costs the Chinese consumer more than before, because the renminbi has lost value relative to the dollar. And so, Chinese demand for American goods drops just as American demand for Chinese goods dropped, leaving the trade deficit unchanged. This is all to say that attempts to balance the trade deficit through tariffs will ultimately be unsuccessful. So is this a grand problem for the United States? Probably not, but I'll explore that more in a future video. Thanks for listening.